We've got a great episode of Major Pain for you today with Billie discussing congenital idiopathic scoliosis. But before we jump into that, I wanted to take a moment to check in with you, share some news and updates, and check in with our audience. This is our third episode since making the switch to releasing full video versions of the episodes on YouTube. And so far, it's been going really, really well. I've been so excited to see the positive responses. I'm definitely feeling like this is the right choice moving forward. I'm excited to keep on bringing you these video episodes. So if you have not already done so, be sure to subscribe to Major Pain on YouTube at Major Pain Podcast. We actually got this comment on YouTube on last week's episode with Angela. This is from Alice Steele, and it says, "Wow, what a trip to match a face to your voice. So excited for the video version. Let's go." This was actually a trip for me because I know what this feels like to see someone's face that you listen to on podcasts for hours and hours on end, and then finally put a face to the voice and have it feel weird. So it's a trip for me that someone else is having that experience with my face. So hello, Alice, here's my face. And speaking of comments, let's take a look at what people have been saying about our recent episodes on social media. This is on Instagram from our recent episode with Kiriana discussing how she visualizes chronic pain and illness with her amazing artwork. Winkler Mitt C comments, "I listened to the whole episode and it was so good. I cried several times. Can highly recommend." That's so kind. Thank you so much for your comment. There were some comments on an older episode that actually caught my eye that I wanted to share with you. This is actually on an episode with my fiance, Andy, discussing her pituitary adenoma. It's the second time she was on the podcast talking about this, back in January of this year. This comment says, "Sorry to disappoint everyone. I have a pituitary adenoma twice removed. I initially thought all of it had been removed, but they removed as much as possible but can't get all of it. It's embedded in the pituitary, and they told me they removed as much as possible in order to not damage anything like the optic nerves. I had a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. They did an MRI and found the tumor. It was 3 millimeters. I had it removed, but it came back. My side effects were severe headaches, high blood pressure, water retention. The pituitary controls all your glands." This caught my eye, obviously, because this is something that my own partner is going through, having a pituitary adenoma surgery, having it removed. And we've learned so much about the pituitary gland from doing this podcast. I'm thinking back to our episodes on acromegaly and diabetes insipidus. And it's just so important to remember that everyone's journey is different. There is no one right way through chronic illness. And one person's journey can never be reflective of the entirety of that disease. So to the person that left these comments, I'm so sorry this has been your experience. That's so frustrating that the surgery did not fix this problem for you. And I appreciate you sharing this with us because it broadens our perspective on what it's like to have this pituitary adenoma surgery. I also have a few announcements I want to share with you before jumping into today's episode. I have to thank the 2 people who have signed up on Rare Patient Voice over the last couple weeks. That is such a helpful way to support the podcast. Now that we're doing the video version of the show, I have pre-recorded my intro that will play most weeks on the show, explaining all the different ways that you can support the podcast, but I will pop in like this from time to time to share news and updates with you. And when I do, I will not play back that pre-recorded version. So if you're interested in supporting the Major Pain Podcast, I will tell you just to head to majorpainpodcast.com/support. There's several great ways to do so, not just Rare Patient Voice, but also our ongoing Patreon campaign. Extra special thank you to our Patreon producers, Steve Kavanaugh, Chris Fowler, Trish O'Brien, and Hipster Leia, who are supporting this podcast at the highest tier of $25 per month. And I do have some updates about Patreon that I want to share with you. Patreon has a really cool chat feature where you can basically set up a chat room for everyone who supports your project on Patreon. This is something that was added a little while back, but it just occurred to me that a good use of this feature would be to allow anyone at all who wants to chat with other listeners of this show to gain access to that chat room. We do have a free subscription tier on Patreon. If you just want to follow the podcast and see when I'm posting new episodes, then you can sign up at our free tier. And I've just added a new perk to the free tier, which is that you can now access our chat room. If you are interested in chatting with the rest of our community, head to patreon.com/majorpainpodcast and sign up as a free member, or, even better, sign up as a paid subscriber to help support this podcast. And everyone who signs up at any tier will be able to access our chat room. And speaking of Patreon, I did just release a new bonus episode with myself and my fiance. We put out bonus episodes once a month that are super fun. And for a while now, there's actually been a running joke on the bonus podcasts as we've started to slowly slip behind. We just released our bonus episode for the month of July that we recorded in the beginning of September. So it's finally time to play a little bit of catch up. It's really important to me that we have a bonus episode for every month. Andy and I are currently in the midst of wedding planning. Things are so busy right now, which is a huge part of why we have fallen behind. So I will actually be releasing an extra bonus episode this month to get us caught up. I'm going to bring in a special guest to record this bonus episode with me. I'm very excited about it. So for our Patreon subscribers, that's something to keep your eye out for. That might be coming out tonight as long as all the scheduling and the recording happens as planned. And if not, it'll be coming out very soon. And that brings me to my next piece of news about Patreon, which is that there's another new feature I am now taking advantage of, where people who are not signed up to support the show on Patreon can actually purchase individual episodes of the bonus podcasts. I've made them available for $3 each. It's a new great way to support the show if you're not interested in signing up with recurring monthly financial contributions, but you're interested in hearing the bonus podcast. Now you can do so by selecting individual episodes to purchase for $3 each. If you are on an Apple device, you might be charged more. There is a new thing happening with the Apple Store where they're charging everyone more for everything. So if you see a price that is higher than $3 per month, that's because you're on an Apple device. You can switch to an internet browser and go directly to Patreon to purchase anything at the regular price. So if you've been thinking about joining Patreon, you're thinking about having some interest in the bonus episodes, but you want to check one out first to see if it's worth it to you, now you can. Last but not least, I really want to thank the 2 people who gave us 5-star ratings on Spotify this week. We are up to 52 5-star ratings on Spotify, which is absolutely incredible. Thank you all so much for the support. This is a great way to help Major Pain reach new listeners, giving the show a positive rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And I actually just thought of one more announcement. This is actually very unrelated to the podcast, but it's something I'm really excited about. So recently I started working as the social media manager for a local movie theater here in Seattle, the Majestic Bay. It's actually owned by my fiance Andy's family. It's a very fun job for me. If you know me, you know I'm a huge nerd. I love movies and I love building community. It's a huge part of what I love about this podcast. And now I get to do that at an actual brick and mortar location. So if you are in the Seattle area, we are putting on our very first retro night at the Majestic Bay Theater. I ran a poll on social media to see which movie our audience wanted to see on the big screen, and the winner was 2001: A Space Odyssey. So we're doing one showing of 2001: A Space Odyssey on Wednesday, September 18th at 7 p.m. I will be there. I'll be doing some 2001 trivia, giving away some tickets before we run the movie. I know that we have some listeners of Major Pain in the Seattle area, so I just wanted to personally invite you to the first retro night at the Majestic Bay Theater. You can find all the details at majesticbay.com, where you can also find links to all the social media platforms that we use at the theater, where you will see my face on the social media talking about movies. All right, well, let's get into our amazing episode with Billie. And as we do so, I'll remind you that I am not a medical professional. Please do not take any medical action based off what you hear on this podcast without first consulting your doctor.
How lucky it is just to get through a day without pain.
If you look at me, it doesn't appear that I have a disability.
A test that comes back abnormal, it's like, yes, we're onto something here.
Welcome to Major Pain. I'm your host, Jesse Mercury, and this week I'm joined by my guest, Billie. Billie, welcome to the show.
Hi.
So excited to talk to you today. Let's get to know you a little bit. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. My name's Billie. I go by Billie B on TikTok. I'm a logistics analyst by day. I was a cabaret, burlesque, and sideshow performer for 10 years before that.
Wow.
I live in Philly now. I'm originally from North Carolina, but grew up in Orlando, so I've been all over the place. I love my TikTok channel. I've got 330,000 subscribers, and mostly on my channel, we talk about a little bit of everything, circus history, but I'm known as the Pyrex Lady. So I post a lot of videos about glassware and glass history and Pyrex, and my messages are always open. So if anybody out there has any questions about their glass or glassware history, just send them my way. TikTok will not block you.
How did you get into glassware? That's such a unique hobby.
Woo, it's a long story. I come from a very long line of people in Hickory, North Carolina, who do a lot of weird things. And one thing that my grandmother did is she owned a pawn shop and antique store. And so growing up, when my parents were sick of me during the summers, they would pawn me off literally and figuratively on my grandma. And so I would be in my grandma's pawn shop surrounded by seedy characters, but she knew so much about everything. And it was like her life's mission to impart her encyclopedia brain onto me because I was one of her first grandchildren. So she was like, I was the first girl too. So she's like, you must be a small me. So every little thing she'd pick up and be like, this is this, this is this. And I just, as you know, kids do, you just absorb all of it. But it's a special interest because glass is so like, we use it 24/7 and people have no idea what they're looking at. They could be looking at a priceless piece of history and have no idea. So it's just super fun to be like, guess how much that glassware costs? And people all of a sudden are like, I need to buy a china cabinet. Like, my bad. I didn't realize I was using like a $400 cup. I'm like, yeah, you should put that away. So yeah, I got into that totally by happenstance on accident. And I posted one video on TikTok 4 years ago talking about somebody finding a piece of Pyrex that I hadn't seen in like 15 years. And it got 7 million views.
Oh my God.
4 days.
Wow.
And everyone was like, the Pyrex Lady. I'm like, I am not. Okay. Like, I'm just like, all right, I'll take that name. But like, I didn't realize how much glass knowledge I knew until people started asking me questions. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then it just turned into a snowball effect.
Yeah.
And here I am now.
Well, people want to find out that their glassware is valuable so they can sell it and make money.
Oh, the inverse happens so much more often. They're like, my grandma said this is priceless. I'm like, it's $20 on eBay. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I'm like, I ruined your family lore. Like, I just feel awful. But I mean, it's good that if people know. It's good that people know.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. What are you nerdy for on like film and TV and stuff? This is just how I get to know people because I used to be a sci-fi podcaster.
Really? You would get along great with me and my partner. If you're ever in Philly, let me know. We can sit on the porch and drink coffee and chat. But oh God, when it comes to TV and film, we love all of it. We're huge horror movie buffs though. Like we are so into like vintage horror and the inception of horror on film. So we love to watch like silent movies and really old school 100-year ago horror thematic dramas. But as far as just watching stuff, we just finished the entire series of Degrassi because we wanted to, because the show is so long that we wanted to see how dramatic storytelling changed over like 16 years of running.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, yeah, we did that. And we just finished one of what we think is probably one of the greatest shows we've seen in the past 5 years is Fallout season 1. So we love video games. We play video games every day with each other. That's like how we bond. Like both during our lunch breaks, we're playing Hearthstone together every single day. And then at night when we're done eating dinner, like we play more video games. And so we love Fallout, and having that come out and merging our worlds together was just, oh, it's so good. But yeah, Fallout, if you can take all of our special interests and put them together, that's what Fallout was for us. So we are now in the depression mode. So we finished season 1 2 nights ago, and now we're just like, now we have to wait for season 2.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're just...
I love and I hate that feeling.
Oh, it's like, it's such a wonderful feeling. You're like, the last episode, you're watching the finale and you're like, that was amazing. And then you take a minute and you go, oh, man. But the season 2 is supposed to happen in New Vegas, and neither one of us have played all the way through New Vegas. So now we're going to buy New Vegas today.
You got something to do
all the way
to
through
pass the time. Yeah.
We have to understand the lore before we watch it so we can feel superior to those around us who've never played the game.
Of course.
That's how it always goes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, I feel like I have a good sense of you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to hear your story. Billie, what is your major pain?
I have congenital idiopathic scoliosis.
Wow.
So it's a mouthful. So I will just out myself my age. I'm 32. So I know a lot of people who may listen to this podcast maybe have scoliosis or have had the same surgery I had, but I had it back when we were still doing genetic testing to figure out what it was. So I'm 32. I was born in 1991. And when I was 11, in 5th grade, they test everybody's back for scoliosis. And I was the one kid in my entire school that got pulled aside and, told, my parents got told, and this is what this is. Idiopathic scoliosis is an unknown caused curvature of the spine.
Okay.
In my case, at its worst, it was 53 degrees on top. I have a double curve, 53 degrees on top and 38 at the bottom. So my spine literally looked like a snake, which there are people who have had my same condition and surgery who have had much worse curvatures than me. Absolutely. But the reason mine was so emergent is I also had a condition called kyphosis, which is where, so I had the curve. And then what happened is kyphosis is when your spine, if you're facing this way, your spine does this and it curves forward. So I was twisting and curving.
Oh, wow.
And it was forcing my diaphragm up into my rib cage higher than it should be. And so I couldn't breathe. They originally misdiagnosed me with severe asthma, not realizing that my spine was actually compressing all of this. So I lost like 30% of my lung function. And as my spine got worse, my lungs started moving in. So they started compressing my heart. And so I started having massive bouts of what we think was SVT. But back then, when you're like 11, 12, 13, you're like, oh, my chest hurts. Your parents go, oh, it's growing pains. And you're just like, I guess it's growing pains. But also I had just been diagnosed with severe asthma. So they're like, oh, your chest hurts. Here's your inhaler. But as a kid, I didn't know how to describe. I'm like, no, I feel like I'm like gonna pass out. I don't know how to describe that to like adequately to parental figures to make them understand. So
is SVT, is that a type of tachycardia?
SVT it can go along with tachycardia. Often tachycardia occurs with it, but what separates it from tachycardia, your heart is going very fast. What separates it is the type of beat that is occurring. So when your heart beats normally, you've got two little bumps, a high bump and a last bump. When you have SVT, it goes like this. You're practically
just way up and way down.
the little bumps are still there. They're just extremely small. Okay. So if you've ever been scared out of your mind randomly by something and you feel that like thump in your chest, it's that over and over and over again.
Wow.
Until it decides to either get you back into rhythm or like you're going to the hospital because it's not sustainable for life.
Do you know what SVT stands for?
It's, sinus ventricular tachycardia, I think. Okay. So yeah, it's the tachycardia is there.
Yeah.
It's just, I have like generic general tachycardia and that's just my heart beats too fast, but correctly. Yeah. Okay. SVT is when your heart's beating too fast and wrong. Okay. Very wrong. The first time I was put on a heart monitor, not a heart monitor. Well, it is a heart monitor, but an EKG live while I was having one of these episodes, they were like, oh, your heart. Oh God. And then I'm going, are you feeling okay? And me being like, oh, I'm fine. And because I had just gotten so used to it. I was like, oh, this is just what my heart does. And they're like, yeah, no, that's deadly. You should figure that out. And my
that's
mom
just
was like,
caused by your scoliosis. From the curvature of your spine pushing on your internal organs and stressing your heart.
Yeah, we didn't know that until after my surgery. We thought that was something congenital. That was also from my family that we needed to work out because my family has a lot of heart conditions. So we were like, oh, that must just be an extra thing I have. Wow. But when I had my surgery and they put me back on EKGs every 6 months, like it went completely away. So my surgeon who saw, of course, 8 billion x-rays of my spine and then eventually was inside of my body fixing things. He was like, it was really crammed in there. I was like, was it? He said, the sac around your heart is normally a sac around your heart. He's like, yours was like on your heart. Just wow. So he's like, I don't know how you were doing it. And I was like, I don't know how I was doing it either. It got a lot better after I turned 17. I had a posterior spinal fusion. Wow. So I have a 12-inch scar from the top of my back to almost my lumbar, and I have 2 9-inch rods and 14 screws. So yeah, my curvature went from 53 and 38 to 17 and 11. And the kyphosis went away because they like yanked it all back and in. And so when I woke up, I went to sleep 4'10", and I woke up 5'1".
Oh my God.
And that was the most bizarre time, standing up and being, for the first time in my life, eye to eye with my mother, who
Wow.
was 5'3". And she just was like, is that normal? And she started panicking. She's like, what is happening? My surgeon was like, yeah, she was in there. My surgery was supposed to be 8 hours. It turned out being 11.
Wow.
Because they couldn't torque my back. Like every time they would try to like get it in place, my back would just go and like curve back up. So he was like, we had to fuse 2 more vertebrae than we thought we were. So it's much higher than they originally thought it should be.
Wow.
Here I am. I'm upright and alive. I just can't do a lot of things I used to be able to do.
Oh my God. Okay. You're 32 now. This surgery was at 17.
Yes.
And it was discovered at 11? Is
11.
that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Before you were 11,
yeah,
your body is growing in this way that is squishing your organs, and you just think it's normal.
Nope, not even yet. So with the type of scoliosis I have, it is mostly found in people who are assigned female at birth. And like it's something crazy. I forget what the stat is now, but the stat back then as they were doing testing was they thought that it was like 85% of all idiopathic scoliosis patients that were bad enough to have spinal fusion were AFAB. And I was like, that's a really crazy statistic. So I grew up in Orlando. That's where all of this happened. And they swabbed my cheeks to do DNA every couple of years, trying to break down what was going on, because Nemours found that there was a trend of young girls coming in with severe scoliosis with no family history. And so they were trying to break down if it was a weird thing going on in our DNA that could be looked at in fetal development for amniocentesis. So it would go on the list of things to check for, because it's a gnarly surgery.
What is amniocentesis?
So when someone is pregnant, what you can do is take a needle. It's totally gross and amazing that science has come so far. But they can take a needle and they actually go through your tummy into your uterus and take just a small sample, like 2 milliliters of amniotic fluid out, and test all the DNA of the growing fetus to check for any genetic abnormalities. And so they wanted to, their goal was to put it on the list to see, if that's something they could give parents a heads up about. Like, hey, by the way, your kid has some genetic markers that may cause them to have idiopathic scoliosis in the future. To update that still isn't on the list. Still haven't really figured out what it is. That's why it's still called idiopathic scoliosis. We don't know what causes it. But yeah, Nemours saw that they were getting an insane, in my age range, millennial like uptick of girls coming in with this condition. And so right off the bat, the reason they discovered it, so they test you in like 2nd or 1st grade as well for scoliosis. I didn't have it then. So this rash of children that had this all of a sudden were getting screened and noticed right at 10, 11 years old when puberty starts.
Okay.
So they're trying to see if it's an endocrine thing where like your body turns that on and goes, now's the time. But what we found out in the last 1 to 2 years is that my type of scoliosis may be comorbid with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Yeah, which also is more common in girls and women than it is anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense that a connective tissue disease could involve how the spine is held together. And exactly. I guess if it is crunching down and curving, because there's not enough support. Exactly,
to make it straight.
If they support it and then you get taller, then this does kind of make sense that if your connective tissue, if you're, everything that's holding everything together, the collagen in your body is loose and bendy, it would make sense that your spine might crunch down and start to curve. Right.
Yeah, I've been looking for somebody to test me. You can't specifically necessarily test properly for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There is the Baton scale, which is great. And I forget the percentage. I don't want to misquote anything, but it's quite a dismally low percentage of people with Ehlers-Danlos that fit all 9 of the criteria to get the actual diagnosis. But of course, there's more money going into it now, thankfully, because of all the insane comorbidities that go with it. So they're like, we need to figure this out. It's costing us a lot of money. That's how you get medical professionals to do things. If it costs them money, they all of a sudden are like, we have to fix it. So I was very bendy and still am as a child. Like my thumbs do this. I can rotate all of my like limbs completely around. Like my neck is extremely flexible. And I remember when I was, before you get your spinal fusion, they do a battery of x-rays, CTs, and MRIs to make sure your body can handle the surgery. But one of them is a flexibility test. And it's to see how far they can bend your spine before they fuse it. And I went in and they were like, your case is kind of severe. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, we're not going to guarantee that we're going to get you as straight as we want you because of the way your muscles have been growing. And we just don't think your muscles are going to allow it. And I was like, okay, yeah. And I went in going, this won't fix me completely. It still hasn't, but like, this won't fix me in the way they want it to. And I got on the table and they were like, all right. And they have pressure plates where one's up here and one's down at your hips. And they start to press you into alignment. And they did it incrementally by inch. And they're like, are you hurting? Nope. Are you hurting? Nope. And they got me completely straight and overextended me in the other direction. And they took me out of the test and they went, we need to call your surgeon. I said, why? And they're like, we were told to get you to like 30, 20. And they're like, you went negative. Wow. And I went, that was my first, like, is that not normal? I've always been this bendy. And nobody back then was questioning it. I was 17. So like, they weren't saying, oh, we need to, what is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? You might have this. They were just like, wow, she's extra flexible. But never once did they go, we should look into that.
I mean, the awareness of EDS has not been there until the last like 5 years.
No. And even I wasn't even the one who clocked myself. Somebody else clocked me. They were like, your hands are weird. I was like, my hands are weird?
Thank you.
I was like, what do you mean? They're like, your thumbs, do the thumb thing. I was like, do the thumb thing? They're like, thumbs go like this. I went, oh, no. Yeah, mine go in a 90 degree. And also like all of my fingers bend at 90.
Wow.
Like, it's really gross. Like it's really like I didn't realize I when I got into college and started taking classes, I originally went to college for biology. And as I started like hearing all the min maxes of how your body should bend, and I was like, oh no, this isn't me at all. Something is wrong. And I even asked my professor, I was like, is something wrong with me? And she was like, something's right with you? I don't know. She's like, I see a lot of overextension injuries and like, you're not going to get them? I was like, great. But then the flip side of that is I'm miserable. I'm in pain all the time.
Wow.
Like I overextend and don't realize it. And so
are you, at this point in your life, do you have an answer as to whether or not you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome?
So no, because getting into an endocrinologist who specializes in looking into genetic factors that may go along with it, the wait list on that, where I'm in Philly, is 2.5 years long.
Yeah.
I'm on that wait list right now, and I'm about a year in.
Wow.
And honestly, but here's the thing though, unfortunately with EDS, even if you get a diagnosis, there's nothing they can do for you. They just go, you have it. And then you just go, thank you. Here's $8,000. Like, what do you?
Yeah. I mean, for the hypermobile type, there's no genetic testing, but for all the other forms, there is. Is that something you've looked into?
Yes. So I have a very good friend who sent me a link to a mail-in genetic test for VEDS. And she's worried that I might have vascular EDS because I am so veiny. Like you can see, well, you can't because this camera's not the best, but you can see veins all over me. And I have had SVT. I now have what we know as a T-wave malformation, and there's no way of getting rid of it. There's no amount of medicine or anything that any cardiologist can give me to make it go away. And I've had a lot of family members who have died of heart attacks, aortic aneurysms, things like that. And VEDS is very, very genetic. So the possibility of you having VEDS, if your family doesn't have it, is abnormal, like insanely low. Like the possibility of you having VEDS and nobody in your family having it is like 0.1, like 0.0000001. So knowing that my uncles though have died of things like that, and that's very close to me. Like that's not like my great uncle's second removed. Like my uncle had one. I am very hard pressed to get answers right now. So I'm going to kind of take matters into my own hands. And unfortunately the test is $900 out of pocket, which is really rough. And thankfully my job is amazing. And I've talked to them about it and I've been like, this is weird. Can I like fix my taxes this year to get more money up front? And they're like, we don't advise it, but yeah. And then I told them, I was like, it's for genetic testing. And they went, oh, and they put me on an HSA and they're like, here you go. Here's your stuff. So hopefully by December, I'll have it, have enough HSA money to, get it going and be able to be put on my thing. I personally, I don't think I have VEDS, but the peace of mind would be really nice.
Yeah, it's really important to know these things about our bodies, especially because you have all of this evidence. Do you have any issues? You mentioned having a high heart rate. Do you know whether or not you have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome? Do you get really dizzy when you stand up?
So God bless my general practitioner. Her name's Tryphena. If you're in the Philadelphia area, Tryphena, go see her. She specializes in women's health, but specifically in not normally diagnosed conditions and chronic conditions. That's like her favorite thing to do. So I am a joyride.
I love people like that.
Yeah,
they're so hard to find.
She saw my file and she was like, this is great. I was like, I don't like how excited you are. This is really weird. Like normally I get a doctor who's like rolling their eyes and they're like, sure, yeah, whatever. And they don't believe me. But no, she was like, oh man, it just kept going through my file. She's like, you are a mess. Like I am a mess. Thank you. And she's like, the first appointment I ever had. Now this is a general practitioner. They'll spend 5 minutes with you if you are lucky. This woman spent 2.5 hours with me. She bumped a bunch of her patients and was like, they're just coming in for a flu shot. They're just coming in for this. She's like, they can wait. She's like, we need to get you figured out. And she took so much blood out of me and she tested me for things I had never even heard of. She's like, let's go. Like, she's like, if it's here. And she was like checking my insurance, made sure it was all covered. And I got like 50 something tests done where she's like, I want like, what's wrong with your blood? Your eyes are weird. Like she was just she's like, everything about you so strange. So I got her and it's been great, but it's been weird. Yeah. Like I'm tired all the time. I hurt all the time. And we're trying to figure out what other comorbidities I might have. But the first thing she said was, you look like a potsy. I said, I look? What does that mean? And she's like, stand up. And I was like, okay. And then she sat down and we kept talking. And I was just standing there because like, she didn't tell me to sit down. So I'm standing talking to her about something completely different. And she's like getting me talking. And then I start doing this number. She's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. She's like, you're swaying. I was like, I am? She's like, yeah, do you feel dizzy? I was like, no, I'm a little tired. And she's like, you need to sit down. You're going to pass out. I was like, no, I'm fine. And then like on cue, like my vision starts doing this. And she's like, yeah, you locked your knees. You need to sit down. She's like, there is a horrible comorbidity between Ehlers-Danlos and POTS. And she said, and a lot of it has to do with overextension. She's like, your blood's being cut off. You've overextended your knees so far that the blood to your feet is just not happening. And she's like, so that makes your body go, oh, it's the reset button. She's like, so I get people who have POTS and don't have EDS. And she's like, they present differently. And she's like, unfortunately, people with EDS present POTS in a specific way, and they're not caught by things like a tilt table test.
Oh,
so do I have POTS? Dunno. We're still trying to figure that out. She doesn't want to put me through a tilt table test because she finds them barbaric. And having watched a few and heard a ton of my friends with POTS have them, they are so like, they just hurt your mental status. Like you're forced to go through the worst part of your day repeatedly for like an hour and a half. And I'm like,
I've had one. I've had a tilt table test and I didn't find it bad at all.
Okay.
But I don't have POTS.
Okay, so there's
but that's how we got onto the track that I do have small fiber neuropathy because I did a tilt table test with the full dysautonomia panel, and that's how they found out that my sweat response was off. And then I went to get a punch biopsy, and they discovered that I had small fiber neuropathy, which is, another form of dysautonomia that can cause some overlap with POTS, which is why I had the tilt table test to begin with.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, it ended up being an extremely helpful experience. I had done the at-home tilt table test with my own heart monitor that I learned about from this podcast from Michelle back in season 1.
Aren't they fun? I've tried them too. They don't work on me. So
yeah, for me, I was like, oh my God, I have POTS. I was sure that I had POTS.
Yeah.
But then when I did the tilt table test, it didn't show that, and it was the small fiber neuropathy instead. But, so for me, when like they tilt me up, it wasn't the worst part of my day because I don't have POTS.
Yeah, Trifina was very hesitant to put me in a full tilt table because she was like, you're swaying standing.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't want to do that to you. She's like, I don't even think you'd make it 15 minutes. I was like, why?
Yeah.
She goes, I think they tilt you back. And the moment they did even like a degree, she's like, you would be out like a light. But because of my heart problems, she doesn't want to like exacerbate any of my other problems too, which I thank her for that. The problem is the way our medical system in the United States is set up is that they are very rigid about what kind of tests you must do to get a certain diagnosis.
Right.
And POTS is still not considered a general diagnosis. It's considered a specialty diagnosis. And because of that, she can like outline, put suspected POTS, but she can't say this person has POTS without the test being done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in trying to protect me from other doctors, because when you find a good doctor, it's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But she knows, and she's told me that other doctors are so dismissive of it. She said, my fear is that if I put suspected POTS and you haven't done the test, another doctor will see that as you being combative and not wanting to do the test and trying to diagnose yourself. But I was like, there it is. This is the same reason that I have been diagnosed with autism and it's not on my files. Because if I am diagnosed with autism, it's very possible that if the DMV hears about it, I will have to retest my driver's license every single year.
Really?
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of states in the US where if you have an autism diagnosis and somebody catches wind of it from the DMV, say because you were in a car accident, even if you didn't cause it, they will look into your medical background and try to find a reason. And that's one reason that comes up.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know it doesn't. Because we walk among you. Like we're all like we all hold jobs. Like a whole bunch of us are like, what society would call functional. Like we're here. Like the only wreck I've ever been in was because I was at a standstill and someone was drunk driving and they ran into the back of me. So clearly that's not my fault. But if I had that on my medical record and they even suspected that I was distracted in any way, the courts can demand my medical records. And yes, has, in New York, there's a couple of people I know who that has happened to them. They got an autism diagnosis and then were part of a car accident that had nothing to do with them. And now every year they have to retest their driver's license.
That's so annoying.
It is so annoying.
You are a real chronic illness onion.
I am.
We start talking about scoliosis. And as we peel back the layers, we've now gone through EDS and POTS and autism.
Yeah.
And obviously you've had a real tumultuous diagnostic journey as well.
Backwards. It's all backwards.
Yeah, and it's all backwards. It's so interesting. I want to jump back to the scoliosis for a little bit. So when you hit puberty, is that when your spine started to curve? Okay.
Bad. Violently fast, too. It was like literally 0 to 100. Sorry, coffee break.
Yeah, coffee break.
It's not even caffeinated. Because I have, and it's low acid, no caffeine coffee because I have GERD and my heart beats wrong. So my doctor was like, you can't have coffee anymore. And I was like, I will find a loophole.
I can't have coffee because I have MCAS, but I did find a loophole with one green tea, Benefuki green tea.
You got to work around it.
There's always a loophole.
Yeah.
And I drink it every day and I adore it so much.
Heck yeah. Send me the link to that, please. I want to try it. I love tea. Yeah. We're a big tea household too. So
it's actually, I have it on the Major Pain Podcast Amazon shop.
Perfect. I will go order it after this. But yeah,
Amazon.com/shop/Major Pain Podcast. It's Benefuki green tea and it is not fermented. So
Okay.
it is like steamed and then dried. So someone with MCAS maybe can tolerate it. It depends for every different person. But it's also high in methylated catechins, I think they're called, which can be good for people with MCAS. It can be helpful for people with allergens. And
I'm down.
So I've been nervous because I've been drinking it for a while. And at first I was like a little tiny cup, I just want to be careful. And now it's like, I'm just downing it every day.
Them.
And sometimes I'll brew it twice in a day. And I found that if I'm actually having a flare up, sometimes it makes me feel even better. So it's just an absolute godsend.
I'm totally trying
it.
that. I am like, I'm allergic to so much crap. And I don't have
I was going to
MCAS.
ask you about MCAS.
I don't have MCAS.
Okay.
They do it by levels, and I'm like apparently like 5 levels below what you would need to be for MCAS.
Okay.
But man, I'm allergic to weird stuff. Like I'm allergic to tropical fruits, which is a total bummer because growing up in Florida. Yeah, growing up in Florida, that's all that's around.
Yeah.
Like kiwis are like $1 a dozen, and like bananas are just there, and like all this other stuff. I can't have anything with high enzymes. But the loophole is Dole. Their cans of pineapple juice are so pasteurized that it's killed all the enzymes I'm allergic to. So I drink that because it makes me feel better.
Always a loophole.
And I have Dole Whip at Disney because they use that canned stuff. So there is a loophole. But scoliosis.
Scoliosis. Puberty.
Yes. Violent. Like I hit 11 and we had, like I say before, they take you to the nurse's office and one by one, you have to like take your shirt off and they measure your spine. I was the only one in my whole 5th grade class that got pulled aside. How embarrassing that you have to sit there until they're done with all 550 students. Me in the nurse's office, just like, is something wrong? And I got so scared that I was like, this is it. I'm dying. Like, this is it. Like I had started having pains in my chest. So I was like, oh, that's it. Like, this is it. Like, we're dead. Because my family is chronically ill as well. So I was like, oh yeah, no, this is it. So the nurse at the school was very gentle, and I wish she had been less gentle with my parents about it. I wish she had been like, your kid needs intervention immediately. But she didn't say that. She said, hey, go to your GP, which GP, Dr. Gans, Winter Garden, Florida, God bless you, woman. She kind of yelled at my mom because my mom waited until my next yearly checkup to go, and the nurse said that she might have scoliosis. And that woman, you could hear her neck just whoosh.
Yeah.
What do you mean? And she's like, she has scoliosis? And then immediately she like pulled out the letter and she's like, bend over. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, did she tell you what the degrees were? And my mom's like rifling through her paperwork that she has for me. By this time in my life, I had like this much medical paperwork. She's like, and she's like, 15 and 7. And she just kind of goes, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, she signed it. And I will never forget this. The doctor goes, oh, that's great. She's at 20 and 20. And my mom goes, what does that mean? And she goes, your daughter's shrinking. And my mom went, oh, no. Because mind you, I was a very tiny, short child already. I was not hitting any of my growth metrics already. And this was going in the opposite direction. So there was a time in my growth chart as a child where it went, way, back up. And so I got hooked up with an endocrinologist, with a, osteo human, and then an orthopedist. So no, there was like a specific bone doctor and then like a person who specifically handle scoliosis patients. So I had like 3 new doctors all of a sudden, and endocrinologist was flipping out, and she got really weird around us and we couldn't figure out why. Turns out she was trying to enter us into a genetic testing to swab my cheeks, because this was right around the time that Nemours saw that skyrocket in girls my age. Yeah. And we're not talking a little bit. We're talking hundreds. All of a sudden, girls who had been tested that year coming in with this random scoliosis as it looked. Wow. So she was like, this is going to cost you an arm and a leg, to my mom. She's like, and we give discounts if you let us swab your kid. And my mom was like, amazing. Do it. And so, yeah, I was like spitting in a tube, swabbing my cheek, blood. Like, me and the phlebotomist at Nemours were best friends, same lady every time. And they put me in a back brace. So I was in a back brace for 6 years.
Okay. Wow. And from like what, 12 to 17?
I was still 11 when
Still 11.
Yeah, when they got,
Okay.
so it was right after my 11th birthday that they did the thing. It was like, my birthday's October 7th. So
Okay.
we had just started school back like a month earlier. And then, so right before, I think it was like Thanksgiving break, they wanted to test us all and send us all home with that information. So I think my doctors, it had to be in the summer because it was miserable when I first got my back brace. The next summer is when all this insane testing happened because my doctor picked it up on my yearly checkup that we have every summer because during the school time, we don't want to pull me out of school. So yeah, that all happened from the time my doctor said something was wrong to going to the endocrinologist and getting swabbed to seeing the like osteo doctor to going to an orthopedist was 2 weeks. It was that fast tracked because other girls had started falling very ill. And they were trying to make sure that didn't happen to me. Joke's on them, and they still don't know why. We do not respond to back braces.
Oh,
we don't respond to them at all.
Hold on. So, okay, my brain is just like spinning all these gears here.
Cosmic joke.
Yeah. So is your hypothesis, obviously this is unproven, is your hypothesis that this is all connected to EDS? That
I have a feeling.
Okay. And it makes sense. And I keep thinking about this podcast I just listened to recently, talking about this uptick in EDS, wondering if something about modern lifestyle is affecting our connective tissue, which I found very interesting. Something about our like indoor sedentary lifestyles, you know, or all the toxins that we're around all the time.
I have a weird theory.
Hit me with your weird theory.
Okay. My weird theory, a lot of people say, this is new. Let me backtrack. Let's backtrack. So, we were just talking about autism. Yeah. Have you heard trolls online when you're in the unfortunate comment sections of some videos where all of a sudden they're like, when I was a kid, autism wasn't a thing. Oh, it was a thing. Yeah. Nobody was testing for it.
Right.
Or in the weird, once again, cosmic joke inverse, people just accepted it. They were like, Jimmy's a little weird. Right on. Like, he would make a great mechanic. Wow, he really loves cars.
Right.
He's the best mechanic I've ever had. Even though he owns like 14 model trains, man, do we love Jimmy. And people were just chill with that. And they just accepted it. And they were like, that person's like that. And then unfortunately, on the flip side of that, though, people who have types of autism that cause them to be nonverbal, as in outwardly nonverbal and things like that, unfortunately, were treated horrifically and still are to this day.
Yeah,
we're put in institutions or sent to orphanages and all this other things. So there's always like two sides to the coin. My hypothesis now is that it's not that EDS is more prevalent. It's that someone went, oh no. They went, oh. They actually saw the pattern because our science has caught up.
Yeah. That's definitely, like, either of those is extremely plausible, you know? Yeah. Like either of those options that like it's just gone way underdiagnosed or something is happening to make it more common. We have no idea. It could absolutely be either.
Both. It could totally be both.
It could be both. Yeah. It probably is maybe a little
bodies are so weird. Like there's no way that any of us probably in the next 100 years could even like pin down exactly what is going on societally to cause people to, I would say, pay more attention to what's going on. But it did get overwhelmingly bad in numbers that were forced to pay attention. Yeah. And it's scary in that way. I think with the rash of girls that I saw, I think it's genetic. And I think it is a skipped generation gene mutation. That is my
interesting. Okay.
thought. So
this has happened before, but like 2 generations ago.
My mom is so pro-doctor for me, so anti-doctor for herself. Her whole family's like that too. They are, a lot of them are craftsmen and do nothing but make furniture for a living or like sit in their basements and do what they do. And like, you got to have a limb missing for them to be like, we should go to the ER. You know, like we should go now. And my mother's grandmother and all of her great aunts were all kyphosis havers. Pictures
and
upon pictures.
That's the bending forward of the spine.
Of kyphosis. Yeah. And at first I was like, well, kyphosis, they're old. That's like an old people thing, right? And then more recently, as I become an adult, I start searching for more pictures of my family. And I was like, nah, girl, you were bent over at 30. Like, I was like, you've always been like that. Like, that's not an old person thing. And then my mom, by happenstance, was like, my back hurts. My back hurts one day. And it got kind of bad. She's like, am I having a heart attack? This is kind of weird. So she went to the ER because my dad was like, if you die on me, I'm going to be pissed. So like, please go. And my mom went and she's got moderate scoliosis with kyphosis. And I'm like, it's you. It's you. You did it. Wow. And I think what happened is that generation around there, the boomer generation, all had a bunch of kyphosis and scoliosis. And maybe like passed them by one generation. Then my mom's generation may have had a touch, had the gene, but not severely. And then you get together with somebody whose side of the family also has kyphosis and scoliosis, and you get us. So why it all wound up in the Orlando area, I don't know. That was another thing. They started testing like environmental factors. Like, they got really nervous about like the water we were drinking, because they were like, is this something in the water that's like causing you guys to have weird genes flip on and off and like something's going on? But nope, water was fine. Food was fine. We just think it's still considered idiopathic, so we have no idea. But my honest to God thought is that it is a maternal, specifically a maternal presenting. While men may carry it, they may not present it unless they have a particularly severe case. But it is a maternal past, like XX chromosome presenting condition.
Yeah.
Because 85%, that's a lot. Like, that's not like 60-40. No, it's like mostly girls. Yeah. It overwhelmingly so. My surgeon even said, he's like, I haven't had a boy in years.
Ever. Oh, in years.
Yeah, he was like, well, he just now retired like 5 years ago, but he had been doing this exact surgery for 30 years by the time I got around to him. And he's like, every 10 years or so, I'll have a boy. I was like, you're joking. He's like, no. Literally all of my patients, every single one of them right now, and I have hundreds, are girls. Wow. He said, and I do your surgery 3 times a week.
Wow. That's
wild. I'm not alone. I thought I was alone. I felt so alone when I had my surgery. I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, this is horrible. Because before then, I had a back brace and braces and glasses. I was everyone's favorite punching bag in school. And I didn't have many friends. And it also didn't help. Now looking back, may have been the TISM, where I had a hard time keeping relationships or forming them. And I was constantly called weird and strange. But I was also called a lot of really horrible slurs growing up. And if I had my back brace on, I was pretty upright but stiff. If I had my back brace off, I was called things like hunchback, freak. Wow. I was beat up a lot. Girls were really mean. Boys completely ignored me. It was just this whole thing. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm going from, and this is not what I think. This is what, they were saying to me, is that I was one freak and now I'm becoming another. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I was like, this is just how I was born. I can't fix it. And then I have a doctor go, I can fix you. But in turn, I'm upright. And like, I'm not dead. I was supposed to die by 30. I'm 32. We've made it. I did it. But they told, because I said, I don't want the surgery. I don't want the surgery. I don't. But what caused me to have the surgery is I got so bad that when I would come home from school, I would just lay face down in my bed and just sob because I was in so much pain. And then the sobbing would cause me to have an asthma attack. And then I was taking way too much albuterol, which is causing my heart, which is already under a lot of strain, to be even more under strain. I was doing breathing treatments constantly. I was just miserable and there was nothing I could do. But the one thing I had was I was a dancer. And so if I had my surgery, I wouldn't be allowed to dance anymore.
Yeah. And
so I was like, you can't take away the one thing where I have friends. And they were like, well, you either do that or you die by 30. But I was like, why'd you put it like that? I was like, can we do this like a year from now? They're like, you want to go to college with like a fresh surgery? I'm like, no, I don't. So between junior and senior year, that summer, literally the day I got out of school, I had my surgery. I healed all summer and I came back in the fall And that was weird. All of a sudden being incognito. No more being called a freak. No more being called Hunchback of Notre Dame. No being called all of this stuff. And now I'm just like, one of us. Like, I'm one of you. And then that's when the whole still couldn't make friends, still couldn't be a part of a group. And I was like, something else is wrong. And I didn't get like diagnosed till I was 27.
Wow.
So super late diagnosed. I had been diagnosed with bipolar. I had been diagnosed with BPD. Now, mind you, these doctors were not great. They just wanted me out of the office. They wanted to give me drugs and make me leave. So they were like, you've got bipolar 1, you've got BPD, you've got all this stuff. And then finally a doctor was like, who diagnosed you with this? I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I have a few tests for you. And she asked me like a whole bunch of questions. And she goes, has anyone ever called you weird? And I went, yes, they have. And she was like, what kind of weird? And I was like, and I listed out all the, repetitive, very stuck in my ways, very, like justice minded, all this other stuff. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna put this on your file because you're already very sick. And this will just make things harder for you if you go to the ER. I think you have autism. I was like, what? And she's like, no one's ever told you that? I was like, no. And so I didn't believe it. I was like, I'm not autistic. I'm functional. I've got a great job and I own a house. And like, that's like I bought my first house at 26 and I thought that's just what you do. All my other friends were like, we can barely afford our apartments. How'd you do that? Because one of my favorite things is money saving and how to save it and couponing. And like, I get like crazy with like, I have to hoard money like a dragon because I have like a scarcity mindset. So I'm always like, I have to have like my oh shit fund. So I had it and I bought a house and I thought, that's normal, right? And it wasn't until my friend who is a nurse, we were just talking. We were actually on a Zoom call and talking. And she was like, well, yeah, because you have autism. And I was like, what did you say? And she was like, did you not? I'm so sorry. I was like, what is happening right now? And she's like, has no one ever, you have autism, right? And I was like, I don't know. Do I? And she's like, I feel really bad right now because I just sat here and like diagnosed you. You need to go see somebody. I was like, so like I went back and they were like, oh yeah, girl, that's you.
Wow.
So but going back to scoliosis, how many of us have idiopathic scoliosis, EDS, and autism? It's a very high number.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the connection between autism and those conditions?
We have no idea.
We have no idea.
We have no idea. It's one of those where there are people who are studying it currently. Think like those are the people who are not getting enough funding and are not making a lot of money. They're doing it for the love of trying to help people. But there are so many people who are colliding in these spaces that it's too many to ignore. Because anytime I've talked to a doctor about hypermobility, their next question is, do you have POTS? And I'm like, maybe we haven't done a tilt table. They're like, cool. Anybody in your family autistic? And I'm just, yes. Yeah. Like, cool. And like, it just goes on. And then I'm like, well, I have scoliosis. And they're like, normal. I'm like, why are you saying it like that? Like nobody's actually coming out and being like, here's a battery of things you may have in common with people just like you. Nobody's saying that. They're all treating them separately. And I wish they would treat them together because I think more comprehensive healthcare would help us.
And that's true
so
across
much
the board.
More. Oh, yeah. 100%. Like for every special thing, it's not by itself. It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And it gets so frustrating because they want me to see like one doctor for this and one doctor for that. And I'm like, why isn't there just like, I wish we could all go to hospitalists, but unfortunately, hospitalists only work in hospitals to make sure that you're seeing the right specialists. But I think before you go shopping around for specialists, our insurance should require us to go to a hospitalist who will look at all of your symptoms and then put a treatment plan together for you.
Yeah. You have to be that person yourself, which is so unfair because
so annoying.
Yeah. We didn't go to medical school. Yeah.
I'm so tired. Like, I'm tired of having a binder. Like, to take everywhere and be like, please, sir, help me. Like, and then they look at you like you're crazy. I was like, yeah, well, and then you get that one doctor, like my GP, who I'm so thankful for, who has
Yeah.
kind of connected all the dots for me, where she was like, yeah, this percentage of people that have autism also have EDS. This percentage that have EDS also have POTS. But this percentage that has POTS and EDS most often have scoliosis. And it's just like, it's all that. But there's even more than that. Like physically, I have occipital neuralgia. I just got diagnosed with that last year. We thought I had a migraine disorder. But that's not what happened. It turns out having these rods in my back has made other parts of my spine overcompensate. And at C4, C5, I have a misalignment now. My vertebrae are like stacked weird. And they're not supposed to be like that. And it's causing the nerves in my occipital region to misfire. And you have occipital nerves on either side. So it mimics a migraine because it's only happening on one side. I've been searching since I was 17, right after my back surgery. I had blinding migraines. And no one ever once went, I wonder if it has to do with your surgery.
Yeah.
No one ever stopped to go, maybe it has something to do with that, until I got my neurologist, who is just like my GP. And she was like, no, you don't just randomly have occipital neuralgia ever.
Yeah.
And started interconnecting everything.
Yeah. Wow. What's it been like coming back to dance after your surgery? You know, we know that you grew up to be a burlesque performer.
Yeah.
So, and I'm curious just in general, post-surgery,
Yeah.
what has your flexibility and mobility been like?
It's very weird to be hyper flexible everywhere except for my spine.
Yeah.
I will say that's super weird. I first did burlesque 3 days after my 19th birthday. I was in my first semester of college. It was October, actually 2 days after my birthday. It was October 9th, 2010. I will never forget it. It was at the Forsyth in Jacksonville, Florida. And I had always loved vaudeville and circus stuff because even before my surgery, I was looking into doing contortion because I was hypermobile. And without even practicing, I could sit on my own head. I have pictures of that. And like, I love that. And I was like strength training for that. And I really wanted to do it. So when I had my back surgery, that got squashed. So it kind of went, how can I get dance back and circus arts back together? And burlesque just seemed like that perfect opportunity. I had the dance training. I was weird and quirky enough. I knew how to sew. And like, I understood the business. I won't say exactly what my dad does, but he's in entertainment. So I was like, okay, let's do this. And it was my outlet. And so I went like head first into it. And that night they were having an open call in front of an audience because they were looking for cast members. And I was like, I don't have a get up for this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And also I'm taking most of my clothes off in front of strangers. But at this point, after my first semester of college, I realized I didn't want to be, this was technically my second because I had a summer semester in this semester. So I realized maybe biology is not for me. It was like really rough. And so I wound up going into art history. And I was like, it's the human body, it's art. And so like, that's how I just wiped it from my brain. I was like, doesn't matter. It's fine. I can get over that. And I didn't care. And so, yeah, I auditioned and got it. And they were like, how long have you been doing burlesque? I was like, 20 minutes. And they were like, oh, join the troupe. And so I was in my first burlesque troupe after my first performance. And my burlesque mom, her name's Mindy, she's amazing. She whipped my butt into shape. She was like, you need costumes, hair, makeup. And like, she like ran me into that. And then I have, we're like a big international family. So I had like my burlesque sister is Jessabelle Darlin out of Jacksonville. And we used to do cruise shows, like, the slot machine, casino type boats that go just offshore into international waters. So you can be on a casino legally. We used to perform at those all the time and made a lot of money. And it was like the best thing that's ever happened to me is getting into burlesque. I got to have like part of my life back, which is why COVID's been so hard. Like, because I'm still isolated. I'm immunocompromised. My last show was February, I think 9th, 2020. And so I haven't performed since then because COVID's still rampaging. It's like right now it's 1 in every 34 people have an active case of COVID in the United States. And like, I can't risk that because my heart is so poopy. And, me even getting a cold, I get bronchitis immediately. And the last time I had the flu, I was super lucky, sarcasm there. I had H1N1, and it actually damaged my lungs and my heart to the point where, like, if I was to catch COVID or the flu, like, lights out. So I haven't performed in almost 5 years. And it's a total bummer.
Hard. Yeah.
It is, because it was my outlet, and now I like don't have that. But I found a really good community on TikTok of people and like educating. So like I can do a lot with educating people, and I educate them about my history, about my, my conditions, and find camaraderie with other people who have the same conditions as I do. I can't tell you how many people on TikTok I have as friends who have also had spinal fusions or are about to go through spinal fusions.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice community. And I get 2 or 3 people a day who come in and they're like, I'm about to have spinal fusion. I'm freaking out. Can you like tell me what to expect and whatever? I didn't have that. I thought I was alone when I was having this surgery, because even though I saw all these other girls that were getting tested too, I didn't know any of them. So I felt absolutely alone. And so navigating, finding what I thought I had lost myself, I was like, this is it. I'm a dancer. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now with my life. Being able to like navigate that with another person who's gone through it, I think is like paramount.
Yeah.
And so being able to be that for other people has been a joy, like absolute joy. But then on top of that, being able to talk about all the other facets of who I am and not feel like I am a shell of who I used to be, because this is like my surgery all over again with COVID. Like I lost something that really meant something to me. And then I had to kind of find who I am again. And then COVID hit and I lost, a whole career of who I thought I was. And now I'm like building it back up. And it's just now in like year 4, almost 5 of the pandemic that I'm finally getting there and back into the swing of things. I used to have a podcast. I used to have a Patreon, and that was an amazing community too. But I think I am better as just a one-off educator online, doing 1-minute videos and helping people either feel better about themselves, feel better about the conditions, or learn something new.
Yeah. Well, that brings me really nicely into my last question for you, which is thinking about potentially someone listening to this podcast who is looking into having this surgery.
Yeah.
And, one of these people that reaches out to you, it sounds like this happens a lot.
Yeah.
If someone is on the fence about whether or not to have this spinal fusion for scoliosis, what would you tell them? Do you recommend doing this? Do you think this was a positive thing in your life?
The number one thing I tell them, it's very dark, but it's something I wish someone had just been straight with me and told me. It's only going to get worse. Here's the one thing that might make it better. Is it going to suck? Oh, yeah. The healing from that? Woo! Like, don't let anybody tell you that healing process is A-okay, because it is bad, bad, bad. But all the pain that you're feeling right now, you're going to get a lot more painful for just a little bit of time. Just hold on for 6 months after your surgery. It's going to get so much better. Your life can only really improve with this, because there's only one ending to not having spinal fusion if you need it. And that is more pain. More pain. Like it's the same old, same old. So if you are at a point where you are sick and tired of being in pain, do it. Do it. It can only get worse if you don't. So yeah, because I was told like, you have no choice. Because also keep in mind, about 50% of these surgeries, no, they don't have a choice. They're being told you will have this or you will die. So you don't really have a choice. And you are kind of, feels like you're a feral animal being backed into a corner. Like, I don't have a choice. And it feels like you're looking down the barrel of a gun where you're like, well, am I going to make it through? Yes, it's a very safe surgery comparatively to lots of other surgeries. Am I going to feel okay? Not at first, but later. And am I going to lose a part of myself? Yes, a part, but not your whole self. So like, don't let that stop you, because half of the people that come into my comments and are freaking out about it are dancers, athletes, people who used to have college scholarships who are now being dropped from their programs. It's very mental. It's more mentally taxing than it will be physically.
Wow.
And
Great advice.
Prep for the mentality, not for the physicality.
Yeah. Billie, amazing job on the podcast today. This has been so fun. Please tell our listeners where they can go to connect with you online or anything else you'd like to plug.
Yeah, totally. You can find me on TikTok at BillieBillieB. You can message me on there all you want. I will say I only check those messages about once a month, and then I roll through them and answer any questions you have. So if it's been 3 weeks, I'm sorry. I promise I'll get to you. If you want to send me pictures of stuff that you have questions about, glassware, circus arts, things like that, and you're not sure about what you're looking at, my email address is billiebillybroadcast@gmail.com. You can always email me there. If you'd like me on your podcast, email me at billiebillybroadcast@gmail.com. And that's about it. Yeah. No more
Awesome.
Patreon, no more podcasts for me, but you can find me in those two places.
Well, your story is really incredible. So many ups and downs. And the fact that you kind of went through this diagnostic process backwards is so interesting. And the fact that you're really still in the midst of it. I mean, you're still kind of searching for answers. You have a couple of areas where you think you might know what's happening, but don't have that hard diagnosis yet. And oftentimes there is no such thing as a hard diagnosis. It's, just our best guess. But it's amazing how all of the different aspects of what you've gone through sort of combine together to create this whole. And for me, the really huge important takeaway from this is the fact that our medical system is not looking at the whole.
No,
and I've lived that. I've experienced that. I've heard it over and over on the show. And it matters so much to the person living it that you are the whole. You are the WH, not HO.
Yeah.
You are a whole being, a whole person. And whatever's happening in your body is all a part of what you experience as the world and as your reality. And understanding that medical professionals aren't necessarily going to see that or put those pieces together. And it really is up to you. And that's not fair. We shouldn't have to do that for ourselves, but we do. We all do.
Yeah.
And you have to be the person that puts the pieces together. You're the only person who's going to be in every single doctor's appointment that you ever go to. And you're the only person who will ever live in your own body. And it is up to you. And we're tired. We're sick. We're in pain. We don't feel good. We don't want to do that. But unfortunately, we have to because no one else will.
Just advocate for yourself. I know it's scary. I know you feel like you're about to get into a fight, but if you don't advocate for yourself, you're going to become a number. And so I'm sure there's tons of stuff that says that I'm combative and mean. Great. Amazing. Because I'm not asking for much, you guys. Your doctors tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
I start literally every one of my doctor's appointments with, I'm not looking for medication. And usually that helps a lot. I'm like, I'm not looking for drugs. Fix me. And usually that puts them in a better mood. So advocate for yourselves, please. The medical system in the United States is not set up for you. It's set up for profit. So make sure you save them money by offering what might be wrong with you first. And maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to treat you.
Wow. Well, Billie, amazing job on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Major Pain. I'm Jesse Mercury, your host and the producer of this podcast. Artwork by Egg Salad Salad. Our theme music is the song Time Machine from my synth-pop album Sci-Fi, now streaming everywhere. Support this show on social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, all at Major Pain Podcast. If you have questions or comments you'd like to share with myself, our guests, or our listeners, send an email to majorpainpodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about this show, support its creation, or comment on any episode at majorpainpodcast.com. Major Pain is supported by our listeners on Patreon. Thank you to our $2 per month supporters, our $7 per month patrons Naomi Adele Smith, Sonny Roberts, Kelsey Matson, Alexandria Henderson, Justin Minnick, Laura Stevens, Heather Muncie, and Robert, and our $25 per month producers Steve Kavanaugh, Chris Fowler, Trish O'Brien, and Hipster Leia. Learn how you can support this podcast while receiving special recognition on the show, gifts, and monthly bonus episodes at patreon.com/majorpainpodcasts.